Now, without any more words, I'm going to invite Dr. Sethia to come and share her presentation with us.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the organizers of the conference for putting together this wonderful event to celebrate the birth centennial of Acharya Tulsi. I'm going to focus on Ahimsa Anuvrat. And the subtitle of my talk is Ahimsa Anuvrat, a sustainable imperative for a culture of peace. Throughout history, humans, as we all know, have yearned and searched for peace and harmony. And yet, violence and war remain continuing themes in world history. All around us, except in settings like these, we see more and more discord, growing violence in every sector of life, increasing inequalities of sorts, and animosities on the rise. Daily news reports are marked by cases of road rage, sky rage, and sideline rage, not to mention about the increasing instances of terror, unending stories of horrors about wars, and growing conflicts around the world. Violence is pervading all walks of our lives, such as homes, schools, and colleges, airports, streets, game fields, and workplaces. Most disturbing is the growing trend of violence in schools and college campuses, which does not bode well for the future of humanity. The sad truth is that our youngsters are growing up seeing violence not only as normal, but also necessary, and in some cases even cool. Why is it, some questions, why is it that the human quest for peace has often given rise to violence and war? Why is it that wars are often seen as vehicles of peace? What does it take to make peace sustainable for all? Can a proper understanding of Ahimsa as a core human virtue offer us an efficacious and enduring way to resolve conflict and achieve peace? Are there ways to cultivate Ahimsa not just as a principle, but as a way of life? In this brief presentation, I explored the significance of Ahimsa Anuvrat, as a way of life for sustaining peace, for cultivating amity, and for building harmonious relationships among individuals, communities, and nations. For this purpose, I focus on the following. 1, the meaning of peace. 2, the scope of Ahimsa. 3, the significance of Ahimsa for creating a culture of peace. And 4, the role of education and training in making Ahimsa a way of life. Drawing upon the wisdom of Acharya Tulsi, this presentation will conclude with the significance of the atomic bow of nonviolence as a transformative force and therefore a sustainable imperative for a culture of peace and harmony. Acharya Tulsi's understanding of Ahimsa and its innovative promulgation offers us a practical model for enduring peace. What is peace? Often peace is seen as absence of warfare. History has often been recorded in terms of periods of peace and stability versus periods of warfare and conflict. Therefore, in times of war, ceasefire is regarded as matter of peace among parties in conflict. The fundamental concern that arises from such understanding of peace is that peace is relevant only in the context of war and in the context of bringing the war or hostilities to an end, and not necessarily the roots of hostilities to an end. Peace is an innate quality of our being, not merely the opposite of violence, just as peace is not simply the absence of war. Nonviolence and violence are in fact very different in terms of their premises, goals, and modalities of action. Ahimsa is rooted in unity, in oneness, in the integrity of a whole. This sense of unity applies within the individual, as in mind-body harmony, and also to the unity of thought and action, And on a larger scale, it applies to the indivisibility of all existence, signifying the oneness of not all humanity, but also the oneness of humans and nature. Violence, in contrast, is premised in separation, in division. These divisions can be within oneself, between self and others, as in us versus them, or between humans and nature. Ahimsa seeks to transform hearts, to change minds, and cultivate a sense of care and compassion. In contrast, violence aims to defeat and exploit, and does so by causing harm and hurt. Practice of ahimsa involves conscious and mindful choices. Violence is often committed unconsciously, and many violent actions, such as those in war, are carried out with a sense of suspended judgment, if not altogether without thought and reflection. We often witness and speak of violence inflicted on unsuspecting subjects. But not only one cannot inflict nonviolence, one also does not try to catch the subject unguarded. Nonviolence always assigns primacy to individual responsibility. It is worth noting that Gandhi felt highly skeptical about the idea of inventing a system so perfect that nobody had to be good. And Acharya Tulsi was emphatic in regarding individual transformation not only as inseparable from, but as a precondition to social transformation. History offers us numerous instances of collective and institutionalized violent action, and also of structural violence, evident in inequitable social arrangements such as slavery or serfdom. In all such instances, the dominant locus of decision-making is the system or the structure, and any kind of individual responsibility is generally diffused or negligible. I'm reminded of the poet John Donne, who wrote, quote, "Every man's death diminishes me because I am involved with mankind," unquote. Nonviolence is desirable not only because violence diminishes the quality of life, but because it is a defining element of good life. In contrast, violence diminishes the quality of life and makes it impossible to achieve peace. Ahimsa is not just a means to the quality of life, but it is an integral part of the quality of life in the same sense as the concept of Tao, which means the way to do is to be. To be in the state of ahimsa, then, is to be in the state of love and amity. To be in the state of ahimsa is to be imbued with compassion, trust, and gratitude. To be in the state of ahimsa is to feel inspired by service. To be in the state of ahimsa is to experience the power of humility. Ahimsa is courage and compassion. People dedicated to ahimsa are courageous to the extent that they are willing to give their lives but not take lives. Ahimsa teaches us to forgive and seek forgiveness, to revere all life, to trust and to love. Connection between ahimsa and peace. Is there a connection between ahimsa and peace, whether it is inner peace within an individual or external peace that surrounds the individual? Is peace a matter of individual pursuit or for the pursuit of community and the nation? Acharya Tulsi pointed to this connection in his historic plea for peace issued in 1945. In this plea, he underscored the path of nonviolence as the path to peace. To create a culture of peace requires us to regard all life equal. Acharya Tulsi emphasized the need of integrating this basic fundamental understanding in formal education. Formal education, according to him, must be aimed not just at producing professionals, but first and foremost must be aimed at ethical and moral development of the individual. Similarly, the state should aim at the equity and social justice of its citizens. Scientific advancement should be used for constructive purposes and not for destruction. Acharya Tulsi made a distinct connection between inner peace that can be achieved only at individual level and peace at collective level, such as peace between nations and communities. The path of Ahimsa makes peace enduring. However, it is a path which is both an end in itself and also means to peace. Ahimsa is the solution to the problems threatening a culture of enduring peace. But how can we operationalize Ahimsa at a social level? The only way people can embrace Ahimsa is through their heart, through their inner transformation. It is not something that can or should be imposed. It flourishes when we overcome selfishness, greed, and most of all, fear. Seeds of Ahimsa lay in positive thinking, tolerance, and fearlessness. Exposure to nonviolence and education about it can make people more inclined towards nonviolence. The question is, how does one educate about Ahimsa? Acharya Tulsi stressed the significance of training in nonviolence as a means to achieve peace. And in this connection, he stressed the significance of vows, and that's where Anuvrat movement becomes very important. So I want to talk briefly about the significance of vow, and especially Ahimsa vow or the Ahimsa Anuvrat. A vow is a form of personal discipline. It builds willpower and teaches the value of upholding one's resolve. Those taking the same vows see themselves as part of a certain community, thus forging bonds with diverse set of human beings. So not only vows build resolve and willpower within an individual, but they also build a sense of community among those observing the same vows. Finally, as more and more people accept the vows, the force of vow take the shape of a movement, encouraging others to follow and join the movement. In this way, Ahimsa Anuvrat, for example, can help operationalize nonviolence and can become catalyst for creating peace and harmony within the individual's life, among a group of family members, a community, and a nation. In the final analysis, then, the vow of Ahimsa Anuvrat can help build communities and countries on a foundation of compassion and love. Given the political, social, economic, and ethical challenges we face all around the world today, the Anuvrat of nonviolence is a sustainable imperative for creating a culture of peace and compassion. Acharya Tulsi launched the Anuvrat movement in 1949 as an ethical code of conduct designed to maintain and nurture the moral fiber of individuals through that of a family, community, and nation. In the context of his own struggles with violence and wars spanning his adult life, and the confidence he gained through his personal experiments in addressing the worst kind of violence, Mahatma Gandhi once remarked, quote, "We are constantly being astonished at the amazing discoveries in the field of violence. But I maintain that far more undreamt of and seemingly impossible discoveries will be made in the field of nonviolence," unquote. The use of atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 had shocked the world. Historians have argued that while the destructive force unleashed by the atomic bombs did bring an end to World War II, it also ignited the Cold War, which divided the world, making fear, suspicion, mistrust as the guiding forces of global politics. The atomic bomb is certainly one of the most amazing discoveries in the field of violence, with its capacity to wipe out large mass of humanity in a matter of moments, not to mention their long-term biological, ecological, and geological consequences. Acharya Tulsi dared to exhort nonviolence in a time when the violence of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had exploded on us. He exhorted morality when science, technology, and capitalist order had made it redundant. He replaced self-interest with group interest without minimizing the importance of the self. In fact, the interdependence of social and personal is at the heart of the Anuvrat movement, through which he sought a simultaneous and interactive development of an ethical person and an ethical community and an ethical society. I will close with what he said about the atomic bomb and also the antidote to it. If an atom has in it the monstrous power to destroy the world, as amply demonstrated in the unprecedented Holocaust at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we want to tell the world, said Acharya Tulsi, that we have its counterpart in Anuvrat, small or atomic vow, which alone has the power to ward off and counter the threat of an atom bomb. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sethia. We have with us Munishri Suklal Swami. I'd request him to please join us here on the stage. Thank you so much for being with us. Our next session, Munishri ji, wherever you are comfortable, we are happy with wherever you are. Your presence is setting the right energy circle here. So as long as you're here with us, we know that our discussions are well blessed and well on their way to some good results. Speaking of good results, we spoke about the declaration at the end of the conference. anuvratinfo@gmail.com is the email ID. I'll just check if it's anuvratinfo or anuvrat.info. There's no dot in between, so it's anuvratinfo@gmail.com. There have been suggestions that we should ask questions after every morning and evening session and have reactions to each of those questions so that they can be analyzed. I think in a sort of non-structured, informal way, if there are any thoughts as you're getting them, as we're progressing through the day's discussions, please send emails across. I just had one, Mr. Patavri, Mr. Surinder Bharat Patavri, which was that when we were reading the resumes of all the panelists, there was one particular one which set my mind thinking that can we do some recyclable material for construction, whereby you don't use Badarpur sand for construction, because that sand is actually eroding the beds of rivers, and the recent flooding, say even in J&K, probably happened because the canal got breached, and the breach might have happened because the enforcements get weak with all this excavation. Just a thought. So if any of you have such thoughts, because thoughts come and they burst out of your mind and say, give us a chance. So quickly put them through your devices in writing so that they can burst out and actually translate into action.